So today we're going to talk about CSS and accessibility, inclusion through user choice. And it's a little bit of a mouthful, but you'll kind of see where we're going in a minute. Let me make this a little bit bigger. All right. So first, let's talk a little bit about choice. On the screen, we see, I think there's 10 books. Covers of books are called Choose Your Own Adventure books, and there's a lot of different titles such as House of Danger, Cave of Time, Inside UFO 5440, and other many fun books. So I remember growing up as a child, and one of my favorite memories was reading these types of books and really kind of delving into these, reading out in the yard, especially under a big tree. So they hold a very special place in my heart. If you're not familiar with these books, they're a series of game books where each story is written from a second person point of view. And the reader assumes the role of the protagonist and makes choices that determines the main character's actions and the plot's outcome. I may or may not have cheated a few times and looked ahead to see if I was going to fall into peril or not and go backwards. But that's me. The book series started in 1976, and it became one of the most popular children's series in the 80s and 90s. Fast forward to today, and we have under 184 stories, and it's included special formats like Braille and voice-activated interactive audiobooks. They are still around. So now I'm actually thrilled. I get to use my own children enjoy these Choose Your Own Adventure books. And so I've had a lot of fun kind of going back and reminiscing. There is a point to talking about these because, as a child, I never really stopped to consider why these kinds of books were so engaging. But as a parent, I really see now how this type of book became so popular. It's all about freedom of choice. Because if you think back to when you were very young, you don't have a lot of control over your life. But when you read this type of book, you suddenly control everything. You make all the choices, you're empowered, you become the master of your own destiny. So we make a series of choices every day. We get up early to work out, or maybe we hit the snooze button. We either choose, maybe double foam mocha latte or decaf green tea, depends on the day. Tabs or spaces. Our choices are even the seemingly insignificant ones really shape our identities and influence our perspective on the world. So in today's modern landscape, we've really come to expect a broad range of choices, but that's not always been the case. Back in the day, a long time ago, 1440, we had only one font family. It was black letter by Johannes Gutenberg in the first printing press. In 1986, we had 69 web hex colors. Technically, if you count, it's like 138 if you start considering things like dark red and variations on the colors, but not a lot. And believe it or not, that's not supposed to say 2023, but in 1995, a Netscape programmer named Brendan Eich developed a new scripting language called Mocha, and later renamed LiveScript and finally JavaScript. All right, so fast forward today, and we have estimated, of course, plus or minus 650,000 font families. We have 16,777,216 web hex colors. That's a mathematical formula, so you can't really necessarily get larger than that at this point. And again, that year is wrong on the slide, so apologize for that. I'll update that. But fast forward to 2023, and now we have 100 or so JavaScript frameworks that we know of, and there's probably many more that are proprietary that we don't know about. So life is really the sum of all your choices. But what happens when that choice is taken away from us? How do we respond when given no choice? Not surprisingly, many studies in vastly different academic areas have shown that feelings of powerlessness can lead to negative outcomes like depression, anxiety, and a feeling of worthlessness. A pivotal study out of the UK London Business School found a link between choice and empowerment in the workforce. Other studies have seen things like women becoming empowered when they're giving a choice of contraceptive methods. And then also another study very linked to this kind of information about choice, measured parent satisfaction levels when empowered to choose with schools their child attends. So the researchers in all these cases proved what has been long suspected, that giving choices counterbalances feelings of powerlessness and improves psychological well-being by giving people a greater sense of control over their lives. So with the abundance of options we're used to these days and all the positive aspects of choice as independent researchers have found, why is it that in the digital space, we often don't give our users many options? By allowing users to make choices, we could help them accomplish tasks, but also connect them more easily with others and ultimately empower them. So what do we mean by accessible choice? The concept of choice gets a little bit more complicated, obviously, when you bring disabilities into the discussion. You need to make considerations for each disability type, speaking in a broad sense, and on the individual level, based on the day, the environment, assistive technology, device support, etc. It's up to developers and designers to consider these complex needs and offer accessible choices. And just kind of a side note, accessible choice, I absolutely do not mean one of those third-party accessibility overlays, adding that and calling it good. I won't go down this rabbit hole too far, but really the problem with accessibility overlays is they just don't work. They're snake oil in the purest sense. And not only do they not improve your accessibility, but they do a lot of awful things, including reinforcing discrimination, violating user privacy, slowing down performance, and they can create new access barriers for users. Besides, kind of like common sense, if a user actually needed something like a stylistic change, like larger font size or higher contrasting colors, wouldn't they need a solution that works on all sites and their operating system and apps, right? Not just one site that you slapped an overlay on. There's a lot of different resources for learning a little bit more. I won't, again, like I said, I'm not going to talk about that too much, but I really encourage you to do some research and make your own informed decision. The overlayfactsheet.com is a really great place to start. All right. So I kind of buried the lead here, but if we're not supposed to be using accessibility overlays, what should we focus on in case, and instead to increase the accessibility choices we want to offer users? Glad you asked. There is a lot you can do, but this talk is talking about user-focused CSS media features. All right. So today we're just going to do a quick review of some of the CSS media features that are available to us and how supported they are from browser standpoint. And then at the end, we'll kind of wrap it together. And I've got some demos. That's why I kind of have it on a tab layout here today. It's easier to transition as I have one screen. So you may be familiar with some of these. I think the first one we've all probably seen or encountered in some way, which is prefers color scheme. Color is the heart of every design, and there are numerous studies and articles showing how these perception of brand and other things are tied to the color it uses. One study even suggests that up to 90% of Snap judgments about products can be based on color alone. So when you pair that information with the 300 million people worldwide who are colorblind, it's a very large area where developers and designers can have a direct and immediate impact on website accessibility. Sorry, I should have mentioned before, there are a few GIFs in here, but what it's showing you here is the CodePen. And again, there'll be a link at the end to the slides and to the resources, so you'll be able to grab those if you haven't already gotten those links out. So I've kind of tried to make them a little bit slower so we can see it, but what we're gonna do here is, this is the CodePen. I'll kind of do it here. So it says not on the screen, we see a white screen and we see the words nothing about us without us. And the without is like a purpley kind of color. So again, this is the one that you probably know the most. If you go into your settings, and it's different for every device and OS, but in my Mac here under appearance, I'll have the option of light or dark. And if I switch it to dark, now we see a dark gray background with the teal colored words nothing about us, and then without is in white, and then us is in the teal color again. So that's kind of the two main ones. So these are really, again, I don't want to belabor that one. I want to kind of get to the other ones because they're a little more interesting. But when you add this to your code, it's a simple @media prefers color scheme dark. There's a couple of different ways to do it. but since we're focusing on CSS, that's the way that you would call it there. And then you would change what you wanted to change. So in our case, we changed the background color and we also changed the word without. So that's just kind of a code snippet of what has changed between that light and the dark. And we saw that when we made a choice between the light and the dark, we had a visual change. Again, if you can see it, I'm trying to describe as best I can, but let me know if I need to be a little bit more descriptive. And so this one is pretty popular. I think it's the most popular one right now. We have 92.83% support. Every time I look at this, by the way, if you look at this, if you're watching this video down the road, this number may change as well. I was actually surprised by one coming up that how much it changed in a good way. But I did see a few minor changes from when I wrote about this and first talked about this earlier in the spring. So yeah, it just kind of bear with me. And I also filter it for the most popular browsers. So on the screen, we have a screenshot of the Can I Use for @Media Prefers color scheme. And we have Chrome, Edge, Safari, Firefox, Opera, all being happy, lit up green. And then we have Chrome for Android, Safari on iOS, and Samsung Internet, lit up green. And then we're still waiting a little bit, I think, on Opera Mini and the UC browser for Android. But all in all, we're pretty close to 100% there, so it's pretty exciting. The next one I wanted to talk about quickly was the force colors. So on the screen, we're seeing a GIF of a bright yellow background, and this time the same code has the blue text with a red without, and then us is also the blue. And so if I go back here, so force colors is a really interesting one. And again, if you look at the article that I wrote related to this, and again, there'll be a link at this, you can see different ways to simulate some of these options that aren't necessarily on the OSs, on all the OSs and all the browsers. So one of the easiest ways to do it here, I'm going to right click the screen. And I've optioned in Chrome, and I've optioned this rendering tab. It's a little bit, let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger over here. Pull it over a little bit. Yay, live demos. All right, so it's a little bit bigger. I'm not sure how well people can see that, but in the rendering tab, I have a lot of different options. So I'm going to scroll past these first parts because I don't necessarily need those. But we have the one that we just talked about, the emulation for color scheme. So I could change the color scheme with this emulator. The first color scheme light and dark, but we've already done that. And we showed that in the settings because that's an easy one. But we have also the force colors media feature. So the reason why I'm using an emulator in this case, again, is that I don't have a way on my Mac to show this. And again, Firefox and Safari, they have their different ways to do it, but this is the easiest for demos. So on Force Colors Active, you can see the code that I've already written related to the force colors is identified by the browser and that user directed choice. So in my case, I wanted the force colors active, and so I changed these colors to this. I can go back to the none or the no emulation. So I had changed my settings to dark. That's why I'm still on dark here. So that is the long and short of this. So if you actually looked at this code, what you'll see in the actual code itself, and again, take a look at it, fork it, do what you want with it, make your own examples as well. And I have some information here. @Media prefers color scheme dark. And then if I look down here a little bit more, @Media force colors active. And then you'll see the one coming up, which is inverted. But you can also layer these. Like there's ways to link them together. So you could have potentially infinite possibilities, but let's, baby steps. Let's even just get a few of these in the code to begin with. I would be happy with that. All right, so again, a just simple CSS media feature. It's a simple @media call. And then in this case, I have a force colors active. If you want to learn more about the details, specifics about what your options mean, again, that article is probably the best one to look at from Smashing. And again, I have that at the end. So this is one I'm actually super excited about, the media force colors. So Safari and Safari iOS got their act together, and it actually works on that. So 88.5%. So the last time I did this, it was 30.75 the last time I checked. So that's a pretty significant bump in use. The caveat here, of course, is that if it doesn't work on all browsers, and also it doesn't work on all settings and Macs and PCs and whatever, Linux. I don't want to forget you Unix and Linux people out there as well. So it gets a little complicated sometimes. So the capability is there from a browser and coding standpoint, but not necessarily quite there for the user in an easy way. All right, so the last one's inverted. So inverted is a very kind of interesting one. So this is at inverted colors, and we have the option of inverted or none. So if I was writing this code, this one's kind of a little bit of a mind flip, is that when I write the code as a developer, let's say I want it to look a certain way, and usually you have a certain way you want it to look like, or the designers want it a certain way. You actually have to code the inverse. So what I mean by that is I want it to look purple background, white text, and that teal without. So to actually write it, and this is the visual I want at the end, I have to write it in a way that's the inverse of the color. And somebody actually asked me, I've only given this talk one other time before, but they asked, can you use the CSS inverse function? And I have not been able to successfully make that happen. So ideally what I'd want to do is write it like this, like purple, and then just use the inverse function in the CSS instead of having to like calculate out what that CSS flip is. Again, it's a little bit hard to explain. And I think when I do the demo, you'll actually see the green still, because it's only shown on my side when I change the thing. So unfortunately, the Chrome render tab does not do this inverted colors yet, but Safari does. So if I refresh this, I'll show you at least where the setting is on Mac, so you can go there. So this is one of the ones that actually is working still on Mac. So if I go to general, accessibility and display, I can invert colors. And again, I'm not quite sure if you'll see that change or not, because I've tried to take screenshots of this and it usually does the inverse. So you may not be seeing what I'm seeing, which is the purple right now. But just trust me, or go in and try it on your own. There's another way to do it with Firefox as well. So you may want to take a look at that if you're interested in learning about that. That being said, going here a little bit faster, it's not very well supported. So we have pretty much 19.53%, which is I think slightly less than what it was last time I checked, but there's some wiggle room in there. And you see all these flags on Firefox, which tells me that I can emulate that in a setting, like it's called behind a flag. So there's certain settings that you can change in your browser to allow experimental features to be shown to you. And so that is something that is in Firefox, but we just saw it on Safari. The only trick is on Safari is that you need to have an operating system that can handle that switch. All right, sorry, I get really excited about this kind of stuff, but not everybody is super excited, but I think what it is at the end, it all kind of makes sense. Next up is contrast. So those were colors, this is contrast. So contrast really works in tandem with color to provide visual information to users. And without that good contrast level in place, essential elements like text, icons, and other important graphics, they're hard to discern. So the design can quickly become inaccessible, and we have 46 million people globally with low vision. I think that number is probably even low. Older adults or people using monochrome displays, users in certain situations like low lighting, can also have color contrast issues. All right, so this one's a different demo, but I grouped them together. So the color ones are together and the contrast ones are together. Let me close these. So this is what it looks like rendered full size. So this is a debug mode. So if you're in here in your CodePen, you can go up to, the visual here, and then you can choose how you want it. I always do debug mode because it takes the iframe away from it, especially if you're testing things with screen readers or other ATs. Sometimes that iframe can cause issues. Just letting you know. So here's our stable no preference, right? So again, we'll go through a couple of different preferences. And we have the prefers contrast more. So again, I'm going to right click on my Chrome. There's a different way to open that too for your dev tools, but I'm going down here to the rendering tab. And they also have one for, I guess, the first contrast, yeah. All right, so prefers contrast, more, less, and custom. So I think the first one we're doing was more. All right. So right now we have on the screen, we have the words "some disabilities are invisible," and the words have kind of like a moving rainbowy effect, and the words "are invisible" are a little bit more grayed out than the others. So now we're going to use this emulator to do more contrast. So when I did that, what happened in the code is I made it so that "are invisible" was less invisible, right? So now it's solid white and the rainbow effect is still going on the words above it. I have my prefers contrast less, and now everything's kind of become very gray. And again, it's kind of moving effect still too, but we have less contrast on the page. And then when I have the prefer contrast custom, ideally in the future, what you'll be able to do is have your custom set of contrast settings, and then you could tell the browser, hey, these are my custom settings. It could be anything. You could decide you want like a rainbow bright theme like I have here, or it could be, you know, very like black and white. It could be purple, everything's purple, right? There's a lot of different options that you could do with custom, because prefers contrast doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have more contrast. And that's the problem right now with the settings, at least for contrast. When you go into the accessibility and you go to display on Mac, at least, you are only seeing the increased contrast. So I can increase the contrast, but I can't decrease it. And I can't also do right now a custom contrast option. So again, that's why we're emulating it here. And so again, the code that I've written is related to those things. So we have the prefers contrast more, and then you can see there's some just code on the screen. It's really kind of straightforward. The same thing for less. So again, you have to have this coded in there. So right, it's going to take a little bit more effort from your designers and your developers to have these kinds of ideas and themes in place. But once you have it in place, you can see we've got 90.48% of browsers accepting this. But you see that the caveat on this one in particular, showing Chrome and the Mac at least, we cannot change all of the contrast levels. Like I can say I want more contrast, but I can't choose the other two options. On Windows machines, we have the high contrast mode that many of you probably remember or know about, and they have a lot more options, and they've kind of had that for a very long time. So they're ahead of the game when it comes to how they deal with contrast and even letting you choose custom options. So that is not something I can show here on this Mac, but it's pretty cool that you can do it. The idea is though that we want it on every device, every operating system, every browser. All right, so moving on to prefers reduced transparency. Again, the default for this one, you only have, it's kind of binary. It's either reduced or not reduced. And that's usually your default. So I'm going to go back up here to my CodePen. I'm going to change this emulation back to no emulation. And I'm doing reduced transparency. Yeah, I think this one is not the one that works on this one. So I'll close that one down and I will use my settings. Oops. Keeps changing it back to the default. Hopefully you can see my settings as I'm going from accessibility, display, and we have the reduced transparency on the Mac, right? And so again, if that code's in place and that setting is activated, you should see a change. I know that this one also is not used by anything. It's a 0%. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think this one is one I have to emulate on Canary, which is a flagged one. Let me grab that one real quick and see if I can see that. If not, it's not a big deal. I just want to make sure if there we go. So some of these, so this is Canary, which is the kind of the beta type version of the Chrome browser. So that's where you kind of go to see experimental options here. So again, I'm going to that rendering tab, but I'm going to have to slow down, go down a little bit here. And I think I should be getting transparency on this one. Yeah. So this one is one that is behind a flag and you can activate it, but you have to do it on this Canary. And actually I've found that I've had to reset it. So you see how I had to refresh my Chrome Canary to be able to change it. Yeah, it's hard to see, it's subtle. There's some differences there. But these are things that you can emulate right now, but you can't necessarily do anything about in the real world, right? So we have all these flags on Firefox, and then we have 2 flags on one of the latest versions of Chrome. So on 118 and 119. Otherwise, you are not going to see it. Let me know if you have any questions about flags and all that, and we can definitely talk about that either offline or later, but there are different ways to see this. All right, just kind of moving a little faster here. Motion. So I'm really a big sucker for GIFs and movement and, you know, those micro events that are supposed to delight you. Well, they do delight me. I won't lie, but you know, not everyone likes that, right? Some people it means frustration. Some people it means vestibular disorders. Some people situational temporary disabilities. If I had a, you know, low bandwidth like I might have today, these are things that I might want to consider turning off or turning on. And not only do we, you know, not want to harm anyone, we also want them to feel comfortable seeing whatever is on the screen. So prefers reduced motion is another one that you might be familiar with if you've looked at code before, been thinking about it. We've all probably been to sites where we're like, okay, you're moving way too fast. Let's turn something off. So if I go to my Safari settings, I have one that's called reduce motion. And you can see in this case, I'm going to refresh it. We do have some motion, right? There's some conversations around what is prefers reduced motion and how much motion should we be reducing. Right now, I'll say it probably at the end again too, but right now I think no motion is probably ideal, but in this demo situation, I'm going to show you no motion with a different CSS media query. But so for this instance, I froze the background. It says progress over perfection. Progress over perfection kind of swoops in from the left, and then perfection in purple kind of breaks in the middle, kind of showing that it's not perfect, right? And I have this on one loop, right? Versus the other one, which is an infinite loop. You can emulate this with that render tab as well. Let me turn that one back off on the settings. So this one's really fun. And I think a lot of people are already using this. So that's really great. Again, a media query prefers reduce motion, reduce some information. And this one is 93.45% across the browser support. So that's really great when you look at, can I use? The prefers reduced data, that's going to be a really interesting one. So that's the one, again, that we're going to have to emulate with the render tab. So inspect, I'm on regular Chrome again. And if we go down here, we have the prefers reduced motion, of course. We can just toggle that, but we also have this prefers reduced data. So in my case, the way I coded this, I decided that prefers reduced data meant no movement at all, right? And so that was my choice. So in the idea in my demo is that we would like progressive enhancement in this case. So reduced data is what I'm using for no motion. Reduced motion, I'm actually keeping some of that motion because I've also heard people say prefers reduced motion, takes everything away, all the fun things, all the slight movements that they may enjoy. And so this is giving us those 3 options instead of just the 2. And then of course we have our default, which is the no emulation. This is the prefers reduced data, reduce. Sad, like wah here. So a little bit sad that nothing is supporting 0%. We see a lot of flags though, so that's good. So Chrome, Edge, Opera, and it looks like Chrome for Android all have flags behind them. So that means that This is something they're thinking about for future features and that are behind that experimental flag that you can toggle and on your OS and kind of see it live. All right, so doing just a quick review for color, we have prefers color scheme, force colors, and inverted colors. For contrast, we have prefers contrast and prefers reduced transparency. And for motion, we have prefers reduced motion and prefers reduced data. So if you're not considering any of these right now, you're giving your users essentially zero choice. You're deciding what you are giving to them, and that is what they get, right? Whether they want to or not. If you incorporate all available options for each CSS media feature currently supported by majority of browsers, so I kind of put that cutoff around 90, you can provide your users with 16 combinations of options. However, when those browsers and operating systems implement and support more of those experimental media features, the impact on a user becomes exponential, right? 256 combinations of options. And that's without layering and like building, chaining multiple options together. So at the minimum, if you had one for each of the ones we just reviewed today, you're giving your users essentially 256 options. So this large number really amplifies that potential user impact that designers and developers can have on those user experiences. So kind of to recap, accessibility sometimes gets a bad rap in the tech world, especially when it comes to beautiful design and cutting edge functionality, but that doesn't have to be the case. And hopefully you saw a little bit of that today when we emulated some of those potential features that are coming up, especially. So when you offer your users choices to customize their experience, you can include all of the amazing cutting edge things you can think of, but you're doing it in a responsible way. As professionals in the tech industry, we really should aim and make our digital products accessible and offer choices to each individual to customize their experience. Our job is to provide options and let people choose their own adventure. Thanks. And as I'm found on some of these social media places, but I'm not a big poster, but I occasionally do. The resources, I know Rob and Jared and all of them will send those out, but Noticed has my slides. It's actually HTML friendly, so you should be able to use it with your screen reader and other ET devices. And then there's an article to get a little bit more detail. Like this was all kind of high level, even though I kind of went a little tiny bit in the weeds. You can really kind of walk through everything and kind of piece it apart and then talk about, some of those experimental flags and how to get to them. But there's a lot of really great resources out there related to that and links in those as well. So hopefully I probably talked a little bit fast, so maybe I have too much time on my hands here, but more time for Q&A.
Yeah, wonderful, Carrie. Thank you. That was wonderful. There was a conversation in chat that you might be able to help contribute to. It was about the inverted colors option, and there was some conversation about what the purpose would be of that, and there were comments about some people would prefer light on dark or dark on light, or the too much contrast can be an issue. But we're not sure how inverted would actually address those issues, because they could still get some combination of light on dark or dark on light, or high contrast, just inverse of others. And there was an interesting comment from Stephanie. She wrote that I have ADHD, so I switch between inverted and not inverted all the time, because it makes it interesting to me. So maybe a bit of a black sheep, which I think is really kind of an interesting approach. But do you have any other insight as to maybe what some of the benefits from an accessibility perspective would be of inverted?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. And I don't know if there, accessibility wise, if there is one other than, I guess Stephanie just provided a really great example. If you're bored, want to toggle. I think really when you do you can almost build some of that inversion or some of those things into that custom contrast CSS media query. And ideally that you could just choose what you want and it would be picked up by any OS and any browser. And so you could build that into that. So some kind of seem redundant, and probably some could be mitigated or kind of one could be defaulted more than the other. So I think it, and in some ways in this case, at least, it's kind of just another option. You could, just like we have light mode and dark mode, maybe inverted mode is something, a brand new theme, and it's not typically inverted. It could be something just like a new theme, right? So instead of providing you, let's just say you had inverted, so you'd have light, dark, and inverted, right? And inverted could be a rainbow, or like I mentioned, like black and white or all purple. So you could kind of have fun, right? I think that's the piece about, accessibility, and especially digital accessibility, is that um, we talk a lot about standards, which we should, and we talk about impact to users, and we do that, but sometimes we miss the fun or the cutting edge, or those myths about how accessible products have to be boring or black and white, or they have, so I think that that's just in some ways another option, another avenue to be creative. So I guess you could do it in that way. I'm not sure that answered the question, but
No,
yeah,
I
I don't
think so.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I think that's really what all of this is coming down to, is that user choice and preference. And as we get some better support, it'll provide users additional flexibility there. Another question, and if you do have others, please post your questions to the Q&A panel in Zoom. But one is, how can I test a mobile app or website if it has these options?
Yeah, I mean I mean, if you're like me, you're always kind of poking around in the settings and kind of seeing what is updated in the specs. I mean, people are always talking about it. So anytime you have those flags, like on the can I use, that somebody behind the scenes has been working on it, sometimes for many, many years. I know like Adam Argyle was working on the prefers reduced data in Chrome. He's still like really pushing to get that out. And so you can see these conversations and you can kind of get ready for those things. And then otherwise you can emulate. Emulation right now is for some of those, unfortunately, is the only way that we can do it. But there are, otherwise, you play around with your settings, or you read an article that someone has posted about a specific browser that you like, or dig into those kind of, I wouldn't call them like bug tickets. Some are kind of bug tickets, but some of them are feature requests, and kind of dig into that, and you can see this whole conversation, and you can become involved in it. And that's a way to also kind of know what's coming up as well. So I don't know, again, if that answers questions, but it's just, if you're curious about it, you can find that information out for sure.
Great, thank you. Yeah, as a developer of a testing tool, I think having a tool that would just clearly indicate that web page or web application had media queries for those various things to be interesting.
That would be interesting.
I'm making some notes here.
Yeah, no, actually, that's a really interesting point, Jared. I think you should put that in the next wave update. But no, I think that'd be really interesting. Otherwise, you don't know. You really aren't going to know. Sometimes people back in the day had the toggle for the light and dark modes up in like the upper right-hand corner traditionally. And that was before a lot of the browsers or the OSs had that ability. So I see some developers also starting to do that. Again, I know Adam's done it, and Una and some other people out there who are working, deep on Chrome, but other browsers as well, where they'll start to build those features into their personal products, or and then you can see, and then they'll give you like a JavaScript toggle instead of an operating system, or in this case, like the rendering tab, where you can kind of emulate that. So my guess is just like the light dark mode and the prefers reduce motion, where we saw some of the developers start to share those kind of secret changes. I see people probably doing those with the additional CSS media queries and features in the future as well. But otherwise, yeah, you don't know. You just have to toggle and play with your settings.
Great, thank you. Next question, do you have any data on how many people are actually activating these options? I wasn't even aware of many of them.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear you weren't aware of all of them, because it's pretty fun to see them and see them grow, the percentages. Like there's the 2 that are at 0. I'm hoping we'll catch up a little bit more. I don't know of any data for that, and somebody did ask me about that once. Like, how do I know, which ones are going to work for my OS and which browser combination, or my device, my iOS or my Android? And really, besides can I use, I don't know of a resource that's going to tell you holistically what's working, and then a little bit of Googling to figure out, like, does it work on my OS or not, beyond that. But again, if you're in the weeds and the bugs and the feature reports, then of each browser, you know that, but most of us aren't doing that on a regular basis. So I tend to look at what other people are writing. And of course, you have a lot of people in the digital accessibility space who are writing about this. And I saw a couple faces, familiar names, at least in the chat today, even that are doing these kinds of things as well. So I look to them to see what they're doing as well and experimenting. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, as near as I know, I don't think there's a way to like detect if your end users have those preferences enabled. Might be some. I'm making more notes. Might be interesting questions
Well,
for like a user survey that WebAIM conducts.
yeah. Oh yeah, user survey for sure. I think it's a tricky situation in the sense of, can you detect, for instance, like an AT, like a screen reader? Technically, you can. Should you detect? Like, is it bad, form to do that? So I could see how it could also be bad form for someone to detect, like, I want high contrast. Like, why can't you just provide that option for me? And I can choose in the moment whether I want the high contrast or not. Right. So I think there's a little bit of data and like personal privacy concerns that I would have, kind of besides the logistics. Like, the logistics, can we make it happen? Probably. Should we make it happen? Data privacy, personal privacy choices. I don't think you should. I mean, right, you should offer the choice and then let the users decide. Don't pull that information from them.
Yeah, great. I agree. Thank you.
Okay.
To confirm, the functions listed that aren't supported, those are available in CSS, but depending on operating system, users may not have a way to set their preference to use those options. So just that question, if that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, technically today you can use all of the ones that we saw. So we saw 3 under color, 2 under contrast, and 2 under motion. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So those 7 CSS media features, if you go to the CodePen and other people's CodePens, you can see those in action. The only problem is you can't see them in action unless you are using an emulator for some of them, or you have the right OS and the right setting options. Like in the case of me, when I'm doing the contrast one and I wanted to show less contrast, or I wanted to show custom contrast, that option wasn't available for my Mac, but I could do high contrast, for instance. And so it just really depends. As well.
Okay, great. Another great question. Says a recent question in our shop. There's inverted colors, dark mode, blue light mode. What is our compliance obligation? Like really when it comes to contrast, like if they're looking at WCAG 2.0 AA, like is there some obligation requirement that they build in this functionality?
Yeah, no, I mean, so I've worked on I've tested a lot of different things in the past. And when you look at it from an audit standpoint and a standard standpoint, doesn't matter which theme it is, it has to pass, right? You can't pass, like some people have asked, can I just have a dark mode that's compliant and accessible? And then my light mode is whatever I want it to be. The short answer is no. Like if you want to be fully compliant, your full, system, your full website or app has to be compliant. So it's not like, it's back in the days, like, I don't know if you remember, some of us are old enough to remember like the m dot whatever sites, and very like, this is the accessible site, this is the regular site. And what happens is you start to get that disconnect between what features and functionality, even sometimes content, can become disassociated from each other in the sense that you're giving somebody less than. We need to make sure that it's equivalent. So each theme, you could think of these as themes as a front-end developer, recovering front-end developer. That's what I think of it as, kind of like these are almost like their own themes, right? And you can do whatever you want. It could be minor changes. It could be completely different. But again, if someone's asking prefers reduced motion and you're giving them more motion, they're probably going to be upset about it. So you have to kind of, within the parameters of what that CSS media feature is, would make sense. But yes, all of them have to be accessible.
Even prefers reduced contrast? That's an interesting question.
Prefers reduced contrast. Now, I don't know who would want less contrast, especially as I'm getting older and I'm having harder times reading things, but I could see maybe it's super glary, or maybe it's very dark, or who knows, or maybe it triggers migraines, right? So there's a lot of things. I think about it in the sense of, how many billions of people there are and how many, choices that they make, but then also situational, environmental, how they feel in the day, right? There's just too many factors, and humans are complex. I can't presume to know what they want, but at least by giving them this, I'm giving them more options. If I'm doing none of these, I'm giving them 0. if I'm doing a few things, I'm giving them, like 16. But the idea is that we're giving them more and more options. And I really think that that's the future of our digital products, is offering, building things within those constraints of those CSS media features. But then, letting people choose, like, because who knows best but your own self, right? Especially in the moment as that changes.
Great, thank you. Another question, can you discuss more about the opposite coding you need when addressing inverted colors? You can maybe
Yeah.
explain that a little better.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I probably went down a little bit of tangent, but there's a new CSS, I don't know if I want to call it feature, but the way that you can write the CSS, you can invert certain things. So there's certain elements that you can use an invert function on in your CSS, and the browser will read it and then do the opposite. So an easy one would be a color. So if you put in a color, probably black and white, right? So if you put in white, code for white, and you put it in the inverted CSS syntax, the browser would render it opposite. So what I was hoping to do is use that as the inverted, because it's a little bit confusing when I have to think ahead. So again, in that case of the inverted, I wanted it to be purple, right? The background to be purple, but I had to code it to be green, which was the inverse of that particular, was a Rebecca purple. I had to do the inverse of that because I needed to think about what it was going to change into. And like I said on the demo, I don't think you get to see that change just because of the way that setting is. But ideally, you wouldn't have to do that mental gymnastics. So what I had to do is I had to use a tool that basically was a hex inverter. So I would type in the hex I wanted to use, and it would tell me what the inverse was. And so then I coded it for the inverse color, so that green, knowing that it would change to purple when somebody chose that mode. So it's hard to, like, right, if you want to see what the theme looks like, you're essentially building the inverted theme, and then it changes it. I know it's kind of, you just have to look at the code and trust me, like it's one of those that really messes with my mind. Like, and I wanted to use the CSS invert, but right now that functionality isn't possible with that particular CSS media feature. Maybe in the future it will be. That would be pretty amazing. Less mental gymnastics.
Great, thank you. Another question, is there any CSS support plan for grayscale preferences?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So right now for the color one, we only have the light and the dark, but I've heard things about grayscale. I've heard sepia. Again, maybe we'll have like a rainbow bright version. Like, I don't know, like the sky's the limits. I really need to get on those teams that are thinking things up, because I feel like I could come up with a few good ideas on them. Actually, probably some really bad ideas that they don't want me on their team, but I think you can get creative with it. Again, it's that situation where, of course there'll be a limit. There should be a limit. You don't want to do anything and everything. Ideally, in the future, we all would have our own custom CSS choices that we could even put into our OS, and then that feeds it to the browser. You have to do it one time and you're done. Like, I want everything to look blue and green, right? That's my choice. I love those colors. Tell my operating system, change everything that you can to these two colors and shades of them, and then it populates everything. That would be ideal, right? But for now, we don't have that functionality. So again, more choices are better than no choices. So we can take what we can get at this moment and hope for a better future.